Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 5 to Thrive Live. I'm Karolyn Gazella, and I co-host this show with my good friend, Dr. Lise Alschuler. So I've been interested in our topic for a while now. I remember reading about extreme healthy eating probably over a year ago, and I've wanted to take a deeper dive. So today is my chance, and I have the perfect expert for that deep dive. With me is cancer and nutrition expert Conner Middelmann, a certified nutrition professional and the founder of Modern Mediterranean, an amazing online resource. Conner is also a cancer survivor, and she works with people all over the world to help them with their eating habits. And she's also a licensed mindful eating program facilitator, which we will also be talking about. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation, but of course, I'd first like to thank our sponsors, beginning with Cetria, a patented form of glutathione clinically proven to raise blood glutathione levels. Glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body's primary defense against free radicals. It also helps support respiratory health. For more information, visit cetriaglutathione.com. Also, Pro Thrivers Wellness Brain, a product specifically for thrivers that contains cognizant for memory, focus, and attention, as well as other brain-supporting nutrients and herbs. You can find Pro Thrivers Wellness Brain online at pureformulas.com. There's also Pro Thrivers Wellness Sleep, which combines higher dose melatonin and other sleep-supporting natural ingredients specifically designed for thrivers. You can find Pro Thrivers Wellness Sleep also at pureformulas.com. And Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics. It's a best-selling probiotic for more than 30 years, and it contains 12 probiotic strains that are shelf-stable, so no refrigeration is required because of a unique 3-year fermentation process. It's a very effective probiotic. Learn more at drohhiraprobiotics.com. Well, Conner, thanks again for coming back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me back. It's great to be here.
Yeah, this is a fascinating topic. And honestly, to me, it seems a little weird to talk about how healthy eating can become harmful. So how do we know if and when we've taken our healthy eating too far? What are the key things to look for?
Oh, I love this question because it really touches on something I see a lot. People start out just wanting to feel better, maybe lower their risk of disease, especially in the context of cancer, maybe also recurrence risk. And of course, that's a great intention that I support, wholeheartedly. But it can become a real problem when food and health rules start to take over your life. And I see so many people avoiding long lists of foods or ingredients like all sugar, even in fruits, or even all carbs or dairy or gluten, and sometimes all of these, and meat and seed oils, etc. And often without a medical indication. Often it's just based on things that they've read online or they've been told by well-meaning friends and relatives. And of course, this is totally understandable that when you have a scary diagnosis like cancer, you want to do everything you can to reduce your risks. But the problem is sometimes when healthy eating is taken to extremes, it can actually create new and different risks. So there are 4 key signs that healthy, I put that in inverted commas because I don't even really love that word, healthy eating, and we'll come back to that maybe later, might actually be tipping into something a little darker. So first of all, I noticed that people's world gets smaller. They're avoiding social events or travel or eating with others because they're worried that maybe they won't be able to eat the right kinds of foods, and they feel anxious when they can't control every ingredient. So that can be a red flag. Another one is when food choices start to be surrounded by fear or guilt. So for instance, if you eat something that's outside your rules, you experience intense guilt or shame or even panic. And so again, that's another potential sign where healthy eating is becoming a little bit disordered, because food is actually not that powerful, and eating occasionally foods that are maybe not particularly nutritious is unlikely to really have any negative impact unless you have an allergy to them. So another one is when people really pin their self-worth on how perfectly they eat. So they feel like a good person on days when they eat perfectly, and they feel like a bad person when they don't. Sometimes breaking a rule ruins the whole day and even leads to compensatory behaviors like exercising really strenuously, or fasting, or doing detoxes to sort of compensate for maybe a slip that they inadvertently let happen. And so again, that's more about control really than it is about nourishment. And then the ultimate and probably biggest red flag is when you start to see physical signs of restriction or deprivation, when people start to feel tired, even dizzy, they have digestive problems, frequent infections, or they just tell you that they find stress, sort of eating really stressful. So these can all be signs that your diet isn't really meeting your body's needs, or in fact your emotional needs. So there's a name for this pattern that was coined about 30 years ago by a doctor called Stephen Bratman. He named it orthorexia, which comes from Greek and means correct appetite or right diet. And basically what it means is an unhealthy fixation on eating in a perfectly pure or healthy way. Sometimes this word clean eating also describes that. And in some sort of extreme cases where this excessive focus on healthy eating starts to cause malnutrition or high anxiety or serious social and emotional problems, it's called orthorexia nervosa. So then it's like a fully fledged eating disorder. It's not yet included in the DSM-5, but clinicians and researchers are increasingly looking into this phenomenon and using that term to describe this point where healthy eating becomes rigid or punishing.
Yeah, it's so the way I got interested in it is I met a woman who I felt seemed like she had an eating disorder. She was quite thin, and but then I got to know her, and she was very healthy eater. But she also restricted. So, like, for example, she would eat popcorn with the group, and she would allow herself 6 popcorn kernels. And honestly, when I eat popcorn, I eat like 60. I eat like handfuls of popcorn. So that kind of struck me. So it is a combination of trying to have clean eating, but then it kind of tips the scale when it becomes really restrictive, and the physical manifestations are probably like extreme weight loss and just being unhealthy and maybe having some other physical ramifications associated with this eating pattern. Is that kind of how it all shakes out?
Yes, I think so. I also think, like you mentioned, weight loss sometimes comes into it. When you restrict foods, often you end up unintentionally losing weight. And because our culture, including, the medical system, prizes thinness and equates thinness with health, I think people then actually welcome that, and they don't necessarily worry that they're losing weight because they think that's a good thing, and they even expect their doctor to praise them, and sometimes they do. So I do think these are all red flags that are really important to notice, and not in any kind of critical way. We shouldn't be criticizing people, but simply what helping them see what's going on and what's driving their food behaviors really.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. It was with this particular person as well. So, okay, how I would like to talk a little bit about specifically to cancer. So,
Mm.
how common is this disordered eating pattern when it comes to people diagnosed with cancer? Do we know?
Well, the data, it's early days. We don't really have a lot of good numbers. There have been some studies, but they're fairly small. But emerging research suggests that orthorexic tendencies, by that I don't mean just the orthorexia nervosa, but anything that's even somewhat sort of anxiously focused on perfect eating, show up quite frequently in people with cancer. For instance, there was a study published of Lebanese adults in 2023 that showed 9% of people with cancer had a possible orthorexic tendencies, and 22% had definite orthorexic tendencies. So that's about a third of the whole group that screened positive for orthorexia-like patterns. And then another study published in 2022, so this is pretty recent data, in young women with cancer found that over half of them, 58%, reported some symptoms of orthorexia, and 36.7% actually scored in the clinical range for orthorexia symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And when you compare that to the general population, where the rate among young women without a cancer diagnosis is about 4%, you can see that's obviously a significantly greater.
Yeah.
But of course, we do need more data, and I think that is beginning to now become an area of research that will hopefully provide a bit more information.
Yeah, and I hope it gets on the radar of oncologists and other docs as well, because I think that this is really important. And honestly, it makes sense, because when you're diagnosed with cancer, you are worried about recurrence and you want to feel better. And so I could see where this would be healthy and then become an obsession that may be dangerous. So are there personality types or cancer types that increase risk? It seems like women might be at an increased risk.
Yes, interestingly, there was one study I read recently which found that highly educated women who eat organic food tend to be at a much higher risk of orthorexic sort of tendencies than other people. And I think it's a combination of factors. It's not just, oh, you're very health conscious and suddenly it goes a bit too far. It tends to emerge when you have a combination of factors. So first of all, yes, a scary diagnosis like cancer, but combined with a certain personality type. And then, of course, the whole diet and wellness culture that surrounds us, which is a real breeding ground for this kind of almost overthinking of everything we do with our bodies. So on the personality side, the research suggests that people who are more vulnerable to orthorexia often have traits like perfectionism, a strong need for control and order, and more anxious tendencies. So if you're someone who already likes doing things the right way, who feels safer when you have clear rules, especially if you have a history of disordered eating or anxiety, you might be more at risk of developing these rigid eating tendencies.
Yeah.
And then on the cancer side, yes, I think women, also women who have other chronic diseases, for instance, autoimmune diseases, are another area where over the last 20 years, we've seen the emergence of lots of highly restrictive diets like the autoimmune protocol. And so again, that's another group, particularly among women, who tend to then become very, very selective about their eating to the point where it causes them stress. And I often tell my clients, stress in itself is also inflammatory. This is not a good environment for us to be bathed in. Every time we make an eating decision, that we start worrying about what we're about to put in our mouths. So, health risks can take many different forms.
Yeah. So I want to talk about strategies and practical strategies, because that's really what you're all about. So you and I have talked about mindful eating actually on this program, and you and I have talked recently, and you feel that mindful eating can be a strategy in addressing extreme healthy eating, or this particular disordered eating pattern. So what is mindful eating, and why do you think it can help?
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share my enthusiasm about mindful eating, which is an approach I've become increasingly excited about, because I've been a nutritionist since 2000, so for 26 years. And initially, of course, I was also sharing lots of rule-based advice to people, thinking that, there are certain ways that we should be eating. And then I realized that for most people, they don't work because we're all very different. And also these rules don't necessarily apply to everyone. So what I love about mindful eating is it's really more custom made. It's an approach that just brings curious, non-judgmental awareness to the whole experience of eating, before, during, and after eating, and really allows each of us to have our own individual experience with food rather than eating according to a long list of rules that were not really designed with us in mind. So it can, for instance, mean pausing. There's a lot of pausing in mindful eating, and then noticing, am I hungry? What does my body want? How does this food taste? How do I feel while I'm eating? How do I feel after I've eaten? How do I feel when I eat early in the day or late in the day, when I eat in a rush versus eating slowly? So the more we connect with our body and we keep listening to its feedback, the better attuned we become to it. And there's a lot of research showing that people develop, first of all, a lot of their health markers improve. Blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, all these measurements can improve, but also just their kind of relationship with food changes. We actually develop a relationship with food and with our bodies rather than these outside rules that divide foods into good and bad, and there's lots of shoulds. Here we really come back into a relationship with our body. And over time, that really softens the grip of these rigid food beliefs. I sometimes refer to them as magical eating, this belief that if I just do it perfectly, magical things will happen. And I think mindful eating can gently sort of challenge that and replace that. And it also, one of the things, again, I'm currently teaching an Am I Hungry mindful eating program that was developed by a family physician, Dr. Michelle May. And one of the things, again, we do is we train people to really listen to their bodies, for instance, to their hunger cues, their fullness cues, how the energy they get from their food and what they do with it, and satisfaction they experience, rather than these fear-based thoughts about toxins or protein goals or, that kind of internet approach to eating. And this listening can then actually help you notice also moments of anxiety where you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be eating this because it's not on my plan. And then you can start saying, actually, I don't necessarily need to restrict this much. It's probably actually not helping me. So I think, again, it's just a more gentle approach to eating, and it also supports us in developing trust and flexibility. People often tell me, well, I can eat well when I'm at home, but when I go on vacation, everything goes out the window because I can't enforce my rules. And so again, one of the things we do is, well, how can you still nurture yourself and feel comfortable in your body when you're on a cruise or when you're in a restaurant or at a business lunch, so that you can become more flexible and trust yourself to make good decisions whenever you eat.
Yeah, I can totally see why you feel mindful eating would help specifically with orthorexia, because you're basically changing the focus, you're changing the relationship, and it seems like the obsessive focus and the disordered or dysfunctional relationship that is created with food in our bodies with orthorexia, that mindful eating can actually change that. And it's so fascinating, the studies on mindful eating and the health benefits on mindful eating. I mean, it can even help with weight loss and some other things, foundational items that are good for health in general. So how do we do it? What are some key strategies to keep in mind when creating mindful eating habits and behaviors?
Again, lots of great questions you're asking me today. And this is the $1 million one, because it's definitely not a kind of, 3 steps and you're done and you're mindful. It is a practice. It's a mindfulness practice. And I often tell my mindfulness students, because they express frustration that they're still not getting it or they're still not remembering to be mindful. And I always tell them, that's why it's called mindfulness practice. And it can take months or even years before we really shift into that more automatic way of connecting with our bodies. But I like to think of it as a set of small experiments, not a big personality makeover. It's not like the diet where everything changes overnight, but rather it starts with observing, and observing starts with slowing down. So the first step is always hitting a pause button, a tiny pause, just at any point in the eating process, to practice awareness. For instance, we have a body, mind, heart scan that I recently recorded for my students, where I ask them, when you're about to eat, ask yourself, what's going on? Where am I feeling the hunger in my body, and how does it feel? How hungry am I? What's going on? What thoughts am I having? And what emotions am I experiencing? And based on all that, do I want to eat now? What do I want to eat? That all becomes a little easier when you're really kind of in tune with that. So that just that second 10-second pause is already, your first step to mindful eating, just stopping. And then another one that it took me a long time. I used to be very rules-based myself, and it took me several years to really let go of the rules and realize nothing bad happened. The earth didn't open up and swallow me. And I was very judgmental. I was constantly saying, I shouldn't be eating this. I shouldn't be eating right now. I did a lot of fasting for some time and always felt terrible when I ate before my time was up. And so I now replace that with curiosity rather than judgment. Like when I want to eat, ask myself, what's going on? Am I hungry, or is there something else going on? And I had a very funny experience a few months ago, about a year ago, when I was writing a blog post and I was having writer's block, and it was 10 in the morning and I just wanted to eat cookies, even though I had just had breakfast. And because I've learned to be a bit nicer to myself, instead of saying, you mustn't have a cookie, that would be terrible, who eats cookies first thing in the morning? I went, that's interesting. Why do I want to have a cookie, even though I just had breakfast? I wonder what's going on. And then I sort of wrestled with this for a bit, and then I realized, I'm having writer's block and I'm frustrated, and I somehow sense that a cookie would ease my frustration, but of course it's not going to write the blog post for me. So recognizing that sometimes we also have other drivers can be very, very empowering. So the goal isn't to change anything or to kind of judge and say you mustn't do this, but rather to gather information and not to judge and shame ourselves, but to give ourselves the space to explore and really understand the decision-making process around food. My third, sorry, I have one more, if I may.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think getting curious about this whole mindful eating process, I think, is critical. Okay, so you have one more. Go ahead.
Well, and I have the blog post. It's called Dances with Cookies. It's on my website. I finally broke through the block, so you can read it. But the last one, and this one is so dear to my heart, that's why I decided I absolutely had to get it in, is to include enjoyment and satisfaction. I think sometimes when people shift to mindful eating, they think it's all about following rules around hunger and fullness and only eating when you're hungry and that kind of thing. And then it becomes another diet. So I always say, no, it's also about really fully enjoying and savoring your meals. And that, of course, echoes the last conversation we had about savoring. I think noticing pleasure and comfort can feel so nurturing. And especially when you're on a cancer journey or any kind of life stress. And again, I think people with rigid food rules are sometimes afraid if they enjoy a meal too much, they might never stop eating, and it might lead to a loss of control. And I really want to gently encourage people to say, no, it's okay. You can enjoy a meal and it will actually make you feel better all around.
Yeah, I would agree. And Lisa and I have written and talked about this a lot because we're very firm believers in mindful eating. And we some little tricks that we say is to, periodically put down your silverware and drink some water, and that will help you pause. Or eating with your senses, like being aware of how everything smells and looks and feels and tastes. And, so like getting in touch with making eating a more of a sensory experience can help you pause things. So do you have any do you have any other advice? We have a few minutes left. Do you have any other advice for listeners who are concerned that they may be taking their healthy eating to an extreme?
Yeah, this is so rich. First of all, I'd like to tell your listeners that the part of them that cares about their health is not the problem. It's good to care about your health. But the problem is when that caring gets hijacked by fear and perfectionism. So I guess my overarching advice would be to notice when that happens and to protect the caring part while loosening the fear. And of course, that's easier said than done. But for instance, they might try just reflecting on some questions like, what impact are my eating habits having on my life? Is my eating giving me a bigger life, or is it making it smaller? And if I feel anxious and isolated around food, that's really valuable information. And it's okay to let strategies go if they're hurting you more than they're helping you. So that would be one conversation I would encourage them to have. Also, just softening the inner self-talk. If it sounds too harsh, maybe imagine yourself talking to someone you love who's in the same situation and ask yourself, would I say this to that person? And if the answer is no, of course not, then maybe also invite yourself to speak to yourself more gently rather than harshly. I also think if you're worried and you're worried this has gone too far, or people are maybe even telling you, then I think it can be very, very helpful to work with a weight neutral dietitian or a therapist who understands disordered eating. There's no stigma attached to this at all. And they can help you sort out what's really supportive for your body and what's maybe driven by anxiety or wellness culture. So again, I think it's very, very important for people to ask for help, and not because, again, this kind of healthy eating obsession can be quite isolating, and bringing other people in can help you feel more connected.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that people should look for a disordered eating specialist, because this is a specialty within psychology. So I think that get support, and I think that's great advice. So where can people find out more about you and your work? What do you have a website that you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I do. In fact, I have a website and an online community, and I invite your listeners to check both out. The website is called Modern Mediterranean. My work is anchored in the Mediterranean approach to eating, which again is a very inclusive, not at all rules-based way of eating, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. And I have lots of recipes on there that I've actually designed with cancer patients in mind, because I give talks at the local cancer center here in Boulder, and I often demonstrate the dishes that then end up on the website. So people are also very welcome to attend my talks, and I'd be glad to share the link with you. They're free, they're on Zoom, so anyone can join them. And then I also have, I created a community online called Savor, which is a place where I support people with very gentle nutrition advice, but also support around physical activity. We offer movement classes, we offer cooking classes, and we also offer support around sleep and stress management. We interview health experts and do, some in person, but mostly online group events. And again, your listeners would be so welcome to join. And again, it's free.
Yeah, I highly recommend check out modernmediterranean.com and check out Connor's Savor community. She has cooked some of those recipes for me, and I can tell you she's quite talented. So thank you again, Connor, for joining me and talking about this important topic. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
And once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors, ProThrivers Wellness Sleep Formula, ProThrivers Wellness Brain Formula, Cetria Glutathione, the superior glutathione to support liver and immune health, and Dr. Ohhira's award-winning shelf-stable probiotic. Thanks for listening, and remember, you can find past shows at iThrive.com or any major podcast outlet. Just search for 5 to Thrive Live. All right, everybody, may you experience joy, laughter, and love. It's time to thrive, everyone. Have a great night.